What if the woman Britain spent a year measuring for a crown walked out of the room on her own terms, and the tabloids spent the next 45 years rewriting her exit as a temper tantrum? And what if the cruel part of that story wasn't a man behaving badly at a ball, but a system that turned her refusal into a punchline? If stories like this are why you subscribed, smash that like button, tap subscribe, and send this to one friend who still thinks Diana came out of nowhere. The bell lives right next door. It takes half a second and it keeps a quiet channel like this one moving. Now let's get into it. Look at the photograph. December 1980, Wellington Barracks, Central London. A bride leaving the guards' chapel in a veil, photographers packed at the car door, agencies filing images still licensed as newsprints 45 years later. The caption in most archives describes her as the daughter of a wealthy landowner. A smaller one underneath adds a single telling line, former girlfriend of Prince Charles. The standard read of that picture is simple. The girl who almost became queen, settling for a Hesketh instead. A consolation photograph. That is how the papers filed the wedding at the time, and that is roughly how the moment has been used ever since. It is also exactly backwards. She was born Eleanor Anna Wallace in late 1955. The baptism is recorded in Burke's Peerage. Her father, Hamish Wallace, was a Scottish landowner. She came from the part of British society that owns fields rather than flats, the hunting and shooting counties where the Prince of Wales spent most of his private weekends. She rode hard. She was genuinely fearless in the saddle, which is where the now famous nickname first attached to her before it ever attached to her temperament. Understand what she had that the eventual bride did not. She had her own money, or at least her own family's. She had land. She had a social position that did not depend on him and a circle that overlapped his without being produced by him. She was 24, not 19. She had been in relationships and she had not hidden them. Every one of those things in any normal life is an inheritance. In this one, in 1980, every single one was a liability. To understand why, you have to look at what had already been happening for 4 years around the man she started seeing. In 1975, in an interview with Woman's Own, Charles said he thought around 30 was a good age for a man to marry. He was 27. It was an offhand comment about wanting to have lived a little first. The British press treated it as a countdown. He turned 30 in November 1978 and nothing happened, and the coverage curdled from playful to impatient to openly hostile. Then, in August 1979, Lord Mountbatten, his great-uncle and his closest political mentor, was killed by the IRA in County Sligo. Charles was 31, publicly grieving, publicly single, and under increasing pressure from the palace to settle the succession question. That is the atmosphere she walked into. Now here is what that atmosphere did to the women who came before her. Davina Sheffield, in 1976, was a serious contender. A former boyfriend then sold a story about having lived with her. The reporting ran on the front pages. There is no record of Charles objecting. There is also no record of him defending her. The invitation stopped. She left the country for a while. Lady Sarah Spencer, Diana's older sister, was briefly the favorite in late 1977 and into 1978. She made the unforgivable error of telling journalists on the record that she was not in love with him and would not marry a man she did not love. The quote reads today as completely reasonable. At the time, it was treated as a disqualification. The invitation stopped. Jane Ward worked at the Guards Polo Club at Windsor in 1979. She was seen with him a handful of times. The papers found her. She was divorced. She was, in the vocabulary of the coverage, unsuitable. She left the job. 3 women, 3 exits, 3 different alleged offenses. A lover, an interview, a divorce. The rule wasn't complicated. Be young enough to have done nothing. Be quiet enough to say nothing. Anna Wallace entered that frame in her mid-20s, with a past, with a voice, and with the kind of social standing the system had already learned to treat as a threat. She was the wrong specification in almost every column. The story of how she and Charles actually met is hazy and almost completely undocumented. Several biographies place it in the hunting field or through the overlapping house party circuit of Gloucestershire and the home counties. No witnesses cited. What is documented is the winter of 1980. They were together on hunting weekends through January and February. On the 31st of January, the photographers finally got the picture the British press had been waiting for. Anna Wallace out with the Cheshire Hounds, the Prince of Wales in the frame. From that moment she stopped being a private person. The papers assigned staff to her. The bookmakers quoted odds. Her name appeared in the diary columns with the exact half flattery, half audit tone the British tabloids use when they have decided a woman is about to become national property. Every photograph of her that survives from 1980 was taken by someone being paid to establish whether she was going to be queen. She was not asked. Now slow down for a second. We are crossing about 1,500 words and the picture is getting darker. Before we go deeper, drop a one-word comment under this video. Just the word "scene," nothing else. If you have ever watched someone be turned into a punchline by people who were never in the room, you'll know exactly what that word means. Now back to the story. The courtship, in other words, was being run in public by third parties, on a timetable set by a 9-year-old magazine interview and a dead great-uncle's wishes. The woman at the center of it was expected to say nothing while it happened. She was also, though she may not have seen the full architecture of it at first, being courted inside a social world that already had a permanent occupant. Camilla Parker Bowles, then in her early 30s, married since 1973 to Andrew Parker Bowles, a cavalry officer and a personal friend of Charles, was not on the edge of this story. She was structural. The Parker Bowles lived in Wiltshire. They moved through the same Gloucestershire houses, attended the same polo, hunted with the same people. Charles was one of the godparents to their eldest son. When you were invited to a country weekend in that circuit, you were not being invited to a place where Camilla might turn up. You were being invited into her world. So Anna Wallace spent the first half of 1980 being photographed as the presumptive future Princess of Wales while attending events, organized by people for whom someone else was the fixed point that mattered. Penny Junor, who has written more about Camilla than almost anyone, gives the most cited version of what happens next, and her account is short and devastating in its ordinariness. 2 balls, one after the other. At both of them, Charles spent most of the evening dancing with Camilla. The first was at Windsor Castle in June 1980, the 80-year-old Queen Mother's birthday ball. Anna was his guest. Bringing a woman to a Windsor Castle family ball was, by the grammar of that world, an announcement. Every guest in that room could read it. By the accounts that survive, he then spent the evening with someone else. The second came weeks later in Gloucestershire at Stawell Park, the estate of Lord Vestey, one of the great hosts of the British polo world. A ball at Stawell was the beating heart of that particular social circuit. Charles's sport, Charles's county, Charles's friends. By the accounts that survive, it happened again. Then, in every retelling, a line, except that the line changes. Penny Junor gives it as, "No one treats me like that, not even you." The writer Jessica J. renders it as, "Don't you ever ignore me like that again." Sarah Bradford's version runs closer to, "I have never been so badly treated in my life." Other accounts splice the three into one tidy speech with a flourish about him not bothering to finish the evening without her. 3 books, 3 different sentences. One woman who has never, in 45 years, confirmed a single word of any of them in her own voice. That distinction matters, and not for the reason you might think. I'm not telling you the confrontation didn't happen. The relationship ended immediately after the second ball, which is a kind of corroboration. I'm telling you that what survives of Anna Wallace's own voice, the most famous thing she is supposed to have said, the sentence that newspapers still reach for as proof of her fiery temperament, exists only as a reconstruction by writers working from other people's memories years or decades later. Her reputation was built out of paraphrase. And look at what the paraphrase does to her. In every version, the emphasis lands on her anger. She is the one making a scene. The framing is that she lost composure, which is exactly what the nickname had already primed everyone to expect. A difficult Aries with a temper going off at a ball. Now strip the adjectives away. A woman is taken by her partner to 2 formal events that summer in front of the people whose opinion governs her entire social life. At both events, he spends the evening with someone else. On the second occasion, she leaves. She ends the relationship and never discusses it in public for the rest of her life. That is not a tantrum. That is a decision made twice. Once about the evening, once about the man. And here is the part that reframes everything. Charles did not stop seeing Camilla when Anna appeared, and he did not stop when Anna left. The relationship ran continuously through the marriage market of the late 70s and into the marriage itself. That was eventually admitted on television in 1994 and confirmed by the recorded telephone conversation published in 1993. Whatever these women were being publicly auditioned for, the emotional center of his life was not the vacancy. Which means the audition was never really for the job it advertised. It was for a position beside a man whose attachments were already settled in a household. That required a public partner on a clock set by his father and the newspapers. Anna Wallace worked that out somewhere in the summer of 1980, faster than anyone else in the story. Then comes the detail that flips the whole thing. The story everyone remembers has her as the woman who lost her nerve on the dance floor and evaporated. That is where almost every account ends. In the telling, she is swept out of the party and out of his life, and that's the last anyone hears of her. Except she did not evaporate. On the 2nd of December 1980, 4 or 5 months after the Stowell Park ball, Anna Wallace married the Hun Firm Hesketh, younger brother of Lord Hesketh, at the Guards' Chapel in Wellington Barracks in the middle of London. Not quietly. Not abroad. Not in a small Scottish parish church at the far end of her father's land where nobody would have found her. The Guards' Chapel, central London. The photographers there in force. The agency captions filed. Getty and Alamy images from that day are still licensed as news photographs today. One caption identifies her as the daughter of the wealthy landowner Hamish Wallace leaving the chapel after her wedding. Another set, shot earlier that autumn, files her under the only description that would sell: former girlfriend of Prince Charles. She was 25. She had just used the machine. Every instrument that had been pointed at her since January, the photographers, the diary columns, the bookmakers, the appetite, she walked directly into on a date of her choosing, in a wedding dress next to a man who was not him. It is entirely possible that she was simply in love with John Firmer Hesketh, and the timing meant nothing. There is no letter. There is no interview. I cannot tell you what was in her head that day, and neither can anyone. The timing, however, is a fact, and facts carry consequences regardless of intention. On the 2nd of December 1980, the woman the British press had spent 11 months auditioning for the throne appeared in front of those same cameras as somebody's wife. 9 weeks later, on the 6th of February 1981, Charles proposed to Lady Diana Spencer. He was still looking. She was already gone. Read the sequence in that order. She left in the summer of 1980. She was married by December 1980. He was engaged in February 1981. The woman he eventually married was 19 years old, with almost nothing on the record. By the operation of the system that had just chewed through Wallace, Sheffield, Spencer, and Ward, that was the new specification. Ask which of the two women had more control over her own life in 1981, and the answer is not close. Then comes the part I keep coming back to, because it is the thing that actually makes this story worth telling. For the next 45 years, she never gave an interview. Not in 1981, when the engagement was announced and every newspaper in Britain would have paid serious money for the woman who walked out on him. Not in 1992, when Andrew Morton's book detonated the War of the Waleses and the Federal market for royal testimony went white hot. Not in 1993, when the recorded Camilla phone call was published. Not in 1994, when Charles finally admitted the affair on ITV. Not in 1997. Not in 2005, when he married Camilla. Not in 2022, when he became king. 45 years of the single most lucrative running story in British publishing, and she has never once said what happened at Stawell Park. Compare that to everyone else in this story. Diana had Morton, then the Panorama interview, and shaped her own version so completely that it still governs public memory. Charles had Dimbleby's authorized biography in 1994 and a 2.5-hour documentary, with the full apparatus of the household behind it. In that book, written with Charles's cooperation, drawing on his journals and private correspondence, the closest thing there is to an official account of his inner life, Anna Wallace is essentially absent. The Amanda Knatchbull proposal and her refusal are given real weight. Anna Wallace is given roughly nothing. The only archival-grade account of that year declined to include her. Her life after 1980 is recorded in the places where lives are recorded when nobody is selling them. Burke's Peerage. Register entries. Her first marriage ended in divorce before 1986. She married again in 1991. A daughter was born in December 1992. That is the extent of the public record of the next 30 years, and it is the extent of it because she chose that. Now, and this is the late video version of the ask. 3 moments. Pick one in the comments. 1. The Guards Chapel, December 1980. 2. The silence that lasted 45 years. 3. The absence of her name from the only authorized version of his life. Which of those 3 sent the loudest signal in 1981? There is no wrong answer, but there is a wrong silence. Type one of them now. Here is where the cruelty lands, and it is not a comfortable place. The silence protected her. It also cost her the story. Other people filled the space. The version they built is the one that survived. She has been Whiplash Wallace for half a century. She is the temper. She is the woman who made a scene at a ball. The one sentence anybody can quote from her is a sentence assembled from 3 contradictory second-hand reconstructions, and it is used almost universally as proof of the very quality that supposedly made her unsuitable in the first place. That is the cruelty, not a man behaving badly at a party. That is just a bad evening, and bad evenings are survivable. The cruelty is a system in which a woman's entire recorded existence is produced by people who were not there, in which her documented life amounts to 4 dates in a genealogical reference book, in which her one act of self-defense has been permanently rewritten as a loss of composure, and the system did not stop with her. That is the part that should genuinely bother you. Everything the machine used against Anna Wallace in 1980, the past, the age, the independence, the temper. It used to select against her. And what it selected for instead was a 19-year-old with no history of her own, no money of her own, no established social position, and no experience of the press.